back 6 months.
This right here is downtown Staten.
Remember the smoke and flames across huge parts of Oregon.
There's nowhere here that doesn't have fire.
We told you countless stories of heroism and survival.
This is what we signed up for. You know, we take the risk for these people.
But now, one of those fire districts that saved so many lives could soon be gone.
We are hurting emotionally, we are hurting financially, we might not be here.
Here's the story.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Story. Thank you for being here. Dan is off today, he's back tomorrow. I'm Maggie Vespa, and our show remains the same. All the ways to contact us are at the bottom of your screen. You can email the story at kgw.com. You can reach out on social media, always use the hashtag HeyDan. Our team is watching for your feedback now because, as you'll see, your questions drive this show. And something else that drives this show is following up on major stories after the headlines and the hype have largely died down. And case in point, it is hard to believe. But yeah, it's been 6 months since that historic Labor Day windstorm blew Oregon's 2020 fire season literally out of control. We spent so many weeks, you probably remember, hearing incredible stories from the front lines. So tonight, a reminder of one you might have missed. This is the Idanha Detroit Fire District, a group of volunteer firefighters that, like so many, were called into action on Labor Day 2020 when all those fires broke out. They helped a bunch of people get out of Detroit safely. But at one point, the wind got too strong, and the Beachy Creek and Lions Head fires surrounded all sides of town. And there was still a group of 81 people who hadn't been able to evacuate yet, and they were trapped. So these volunteer firefighters led all those people down to the lake to make one last stand.
We were going to have everyone get as close to the shoreline as possible, and we were going to park our apparatuses directly in front of that area to help try to mitigate that heat. So we were going to use our rigs as buffers, and the firefighters were going to deploy kind of right by there and make that last stand.
Think about that. They literally hid behind fire trucks, preparing to wade into the lake, into the water, to save themselves. Now, fortunately, this story has a happy ending. To say it simply, the winds shifted, thankfully, and firefighters knew enough about how the flames were moving to lead a convoy of cars out of Detroit through the Forest Service roads. And all 81 people got out safely, and so did those volunteer firefighters. And that brings us to tonight's big story. Because that same fire district, the very one that kept all of those people safe, is now in trouble itself. And ironically, it has to do with the fact that most of Detroit was destroyed last year, meaning their tax base is now largely gone. So now these historic volunteers are worried about what will happen if there's no one there to help fight the next big wildfire. Here's Christine Pitawanich.
It's been 6 months since fire tore through the Santiam Canyon. Take a look at what Detroit looks like right now. Still debris all over, but some good news is that this week water is just starting to get turned on. It's not drinkable or to be used for a shower. It's for things like flushing a toilet, but it's a start. And today, the United Way of the Mid-Willamette Valley announced it's donating $250,000 to the Detroit Lake Foundation. The donation meant to help build a new community center, replacing City Hall that burned down. But there's still a lot of work to be done. Right now, volunteer firefighters with the Idanha Detroit Fire District are worried about the future.
Idanha Detroit Fire District has been around since the 50s. We encompass about 7 miles, which is the community of Idanha, where we're at now, and then to the west, the community of Detroit. However, we also cover the highway that we hear behind us.
It's a big job for a small rural fire district run by volunteers.
Before the fires, we had about 20. Now we've lost about 10 of those. We have 10 or so.
Half their force gone after the devastating wildfire that tore through the Santiam Canyon 6 months ago.
So in part, our volunteers in Detroit no longer have homes, so they're not around to volunteer, right?
Deputy Chief Damon Faust says others left because of the adrenaline associated with the fire.
And so now, they kind of come out and one call a week. They're like, where's that rush, or I want to serve at that level again.
And still others had a tough time coping after fighting the fire for days.
And it's all around us. There's nowhere here that doesn't have fire.
And then dealing with the fallout for weeks and months after.
And the other aspect is some of our volunteers are struggling with the trauma of it all. We've had a diagnosis of PTSD within our ranks.
Whatever the reason, losing half of their volunteer firefighters puts them at a disadvantage. Fewer people to help in an accident on the highway or another emergency.
Well, we're 90 some odd days from the next wildland season.
It's events like that make you see how important it is to have those people here.
We're at the point now, we've been very conservative with our budget, but December 2021, our lights will go out. We won't be able to pay our electric bills.
Right now, they're talking to state lawmakers, applying for grants, and hoping something comes through.
We're still here, in spite of all these challenges, and the fear that I hope comes across is we may not be here one day.
Okay. Christine Pitawanich joining us now. Christine, it goes without saying, but just wow, such a tragic story.
Yeah, and the thing is, other rural fire districts are in the same boat too. But there is a little bit of good news. They've had some land donated to them, a few engines too. But honestly, they can't really get to all their plans and projects because first things first, they got to make sure that they keep the lights on. The deputy fire chief says people can get in touch with their legislators about the issue, talk to them, maybe make some changes, get some help, or there's also a way to donate on the IDANA Detroit Fire District's website too.
Okay, good to know. And by the way, I just want to point out, again, it's been 6 months. You've really had the chance to follow this story in depth and stay in touch with people. Can you talk a little bit about that? How's that been going?
I know, can't believe it's already been 6 months. Kind of crazy. We've kept checking back in on these areas across the state. We've talked to families who've lost their homes. We've talked to kids, school districts. We've kept up on recovery as best as we've been able to. People living in fire-affected areas have told me that the process to get help is really slow going, bureaucratic with red tape. Statewide, about 4,000 people lost their homes due to these fires. I talked to a FEMA spokesperson today, and they told me only 264 families qualify for temporary housing. So that is something like a mobile home that we're talking about. And only 100 or so of them are currently in FEMA temporary housing. So Maggie, still a long way to go. Still a lot of families who are just trying to get by.
All right. Well, Christine, we appreciate the updates throughout these 6 months and today as well. Thank you so much for your reporting.
All right, so Christine touched on it, but over the last 6 months, a lot of you have been asking about the recovery. And Sherry wrote us, case in point, and said bluntly, where's FEMA? After Hurricane Katrina, FEMA provided hundreds of trailers for victims to live in. And she wrote, I'm still hearing about wildfire victims living in their cars. What's up with this? Aren't Oregon residents just as valuable? Sherry, great question. And you know what's crazy? You wrote that to us this past Wednesday, and the very next day, Thursday, FEMA sent out a press release with an update on their wildfire response. So you may have magical powers. Here's the gist. FEMA said to date, the feds have spent more than $260 million helping Oregonians impacted by the wildfires. Breaking some of that down, FEMA says it's approved more than $34.8 million in assistance for people whose homes were destroyed or damaged. And that money, by the way, is spread out across 8 counties. You can see them listed there on that second and third line. They also say the Small Business Administration has provided more than $59 million in low-interest disaster loans, and that's gone to more than 500 businesses, homeowners, and renters in Oregon. And then one other bullet point that really stuck out to us. FEMA says it's doled out close to $7 million to help people pay for miscellaneous expenses. And they noted that includes things like personal property, transportation costs, and funerals. So, Sherry, to your point about people still living in their cars, that is completely fathomable. The devastation from these fires was and is huge, and people absolutely fall through the cracks. So, to that end, it's not too late to get help. These right there are the numbers for FEMA's toll-free disaster assistance line, their disaster legal services program, and their Safe Strong helpline, which provides counseling, they say, for anyone struggling with mental health in the wake of these fires. We have all that info, by the way, on our social media channels as well. And as wildfire victims are rebuilding, a lot of them are also part of a class action lawsuit against Pacific Power. We've talked about this before. They are blaming the utility company's power lines for starting a lot of the fires that tore through the Santiam Canyon. An incident report actually from September says downed power lines sparked at least 13 fires in that area. Those eventually merged with the massive Beachy Creek wildfire, and fire victims claim Pacific Power kept their lines energized despite being warned about extreme fire weather. Now, you might also remember Portland General Electric decided instead to shut off power to some areas of its lines back in September, right before all these fires broke out. That's the first time they've ever done that because of fire risk, and it helped. PGE told us they're not aware of any wildfires that sparked from their equipment. So back to Pacific Power. That class action suit was filed in October, and the two sides have basically been hashing it out in court ever since. Next month, there is a hearing on a few different motions. The victims basically want Pacific Power to release documents. The company wants some of the claims dismissed. This could go on for a while, as I'm sure you can tell. All that said, a trial is scheduled for August 2022 if things don't get settled before then. So in the year plus until that point, we, of course, will keep you posted.
So you finally got a vaccine appointment. Yay! But then you get an email from the state saying they're holding a different slot open for you too. So what do you do now that you're double booked? And Oregon City is electing a new mayor tonight after they kicked the old one out for, well, a lot of controversy. When the story continues.
Just jog back to the spot after reading some of your comments offset throughout the commercial break. We do that throughout the show, by the way, so keep them coming. You can always email the story at kgw.com. Here's the plug again. Reach out on social media and always use that hashtag HeyDan. And by the way, so many of your questions these days have to do with the vaccine. I know, shocking. So let's go to Pat Doris now on the vaccine beat for some answers.
Our first question comes from Arlene. She writes, my husband received his COVID vaccination at PDX. Yay! Then today he received that personalized email from OHA for the convention center. There doesn't seem to be a way to refuse, cancel the invitation. How do you do that? Arlene, great question. The answer is, sorry, you don't do that. I talked to Legacy today after you and several other people emailed asking us that question, and they said, yeah, there's this big corporation called Epic that kind of customized that for us and 3 other groups across the country, and right now there's not a cancel or decline button. So here's what you need to know. You get that first email telling you, hey, congrats, you've won the lottery. Click on here and sign up. And then you'll get a second one. Hey, don't you want to click on this and sign up? If you ignore them both, that's all you'll get. And then after 5 days, it'll go away. They know it's not the best. They know it's not 100% efficient. But for the time being, that's what they have. All right, so that's kind of the frustrating news. The good news is Patrick Allen, the director of Oregon Health Authority, has said that he thinks the timeline could move up significantly on vaccinating a lot of different people. He believes that by April 21st, 70% of adults in Oregon will have been vaccinated. Now, that's a huge number because they really think like maybe 75 or 80% of all adults are actually going to take the vaccine. They'll work for 100, but you know, they're kind of estimating right now that it may not all get there. So that means that some of those people back in like the June deadline, which is adults 45 and above with no pre-existing, that those folks may move up significantly. Part of it's going to be because that Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there's none coming into Oregon right now, none coming in next week, but after that, 80,000 doses a week. And that is a game changer. So we'll see if the governor and Patrick Allen move up those time frames. They say they're a little reluctant to right now until they see if the government really comes through with all those doses. But that is a promising thing to look forward to. That's what's happening with the vaccine today.
Thank you, Mr. Doris. Lovely. All right, time now for our daily vaccine count check-in, and more, as of this afternoon, I should say, more than 740,000 Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose, and that puts us at about 17.3% of the state's population with at least one shot. In Washington, more than 1.3 million people have also gotten at least their first dose, which coincidentally also, it turns out, works out to 17.3% of the state's population. All right, let's take a closer look now at who's actually getting those vaccines. John sent us this question. We thought it was really interesting. He wrote, I was lucky enough to snag a COVID vaccine at the Salem Fairgrounds this week. And he wrote, I am 71 and white. Even though 35.3% of Marion County's population is Hispanic or people of color, I did not see a single person of color there, except for the National Guard troops assisting in the process. What gives? John, that's fascinating. So we looked up some stats to see how many Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or it's now the acronym BIPOC, individuals are getting vaccinated. In Marion County, John is right. 35.5% of the population is BIPOC. A similar percentage of all COVID cases are in BIPOC people, by the way, 37%. But right now, just a little more than 20% of everyone with their first dose in Marion County is BIPOC. So let's take a look at some other counties in comparison. We grouped the Metro and Yamhill counties together. That's about 29% of the total population of that area is BIPOC, but 42% of all COVID cases are in BIPOC individuals, hugely disproportionate. So a pretty big difference though. And right now, 24% of everyone with their first dose of the vaccine is BIPOC. So now we did just learn that the Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center in Beaverton got approval from the OHA, this is big, to vaccinate all of their patients regardless of eligibility. And that's because the patients they serve have a 14% infection rate compared to the 4% rate for the rest of the state. They focus on providing health care to the Latino community, including migrant and seasonal farm workers. 2 other clinics got approval to do this, by the way, as well. Those are the Columbia River Health in Morrow County and One Community Health in Malheur County. Okay, changing gears. I know it just seems like we just had an election, which we kind of did. It was about 4 months ago. It's been a little bit of time. But again, what is time during a pandemic? So regardless, Oregon City is having another election tonight. They are electing a new mayor after they recalled Dan Holliday in November. And here's a look at the candidates that are running for his spot now. Rachel Lyles Smith, a current Oregon City Commissioner. Damon Mabey, a former Oregon City Commissioner. Alex Josephi, who's held some positions in the state Democratic Party. And Leslie Wright Jr., a small business owner. We should also note the last name on there, Phil Hepner. He is on the ballot, but he's not actually running anymore. He decided to withdraw from the race after the Portland Tribune dug up a road rage incident he was involved in a few years ago. So the deadline to get your ballot in is 8 p.m. tonight. It is too late to mail it in right now, so you do need to put it in a drop box before 8 p.m. Those are at City Hall or the Clackamas County Elections Office. At last check, less than 22% of the ballots have been returned. So get them in if you want your vote to count. Now, if you need a little refresher on why this election is happening in the first place, let me explain.
Oregon City is about to elect a new mayor. So how did we get here? Dan Holliday was elected mayor in 2015 and then re-elected in 2019. He started stirring up controversy last year. In April, when the state shut down because of the pandemic, Holliday considered issuing a declaration to reopen businesses in his city. The state attorney general wasn't happy about that and threatened civil or criminal action unless Holliday backed off. Oregon City commissioners issued a statement saying they never considered reopening against the governor's orders and that the mayor did not speak for them. Holliday claimed he changed his mind and said he did nothing wrong. Then in June, in the thick of the George Floyd protests, Holliday got a lot of backlash for social media posts he made. One downplayed police brutality against Black people, calling it, quote, hardly an epidemic. In another, he asked why there could be protests, riots, looting, and vandalism in Portland, but no 4th of July fireworks in smaller towns. When commissioners held an emergency meeting about his comments, he walked out.
Are you leaving?
I am.
So you're not interested in what the rest of us have to say?
I'll hear what the rest of you have to say on the recording.
a group started circulating a recall petition, and they were able to get enough signatures. Holliday refused to resign, so voters made the decision for him, recalling him in November. And that's how we got here.
All right, a lot to catch up on there. So we'll be sure to let you know the results of tonight's election at kgw.com. In the meantime, though, keep your questions and your comments coming with the hashtag HeyDan, of course, or you can send us something in the mail. My goodness, this idea from the KGW Vault, we got this in this package. It was sent to Dan. We're going to finish the story with that. We're so excited. That's coming up next. Welcome back, everybody. We get so many emails, Facebook comments, tweets, everything. You get it. We get them every night, which we love. So keep them coming with the hashtag HeyDan. And sometimes, by the way, we also get good old-fashioned snail mail. Yes, that still happens. Dan posted this proof of it on his Facebook page of a package he got recently. You can see it says, quote, contents, 1 paperback book. Sounds like a spy movie. Inside is this letter from a viewer who goes by Junior, who remembered Dan talking about the Columbus Day storm, which was known at the time as the Big Blow. Well, Junior decided to loan Dan a book about the storm, which I know he appreciated because he loves learning about local history, and we know that you do too. So let's take a trip into the KGW Vault back to the Columbus Day storm of 1962.
The force of the storm was recorded on wind gauges around the state. At Corvallis, winds gusted up to 127 miles per hour. On the Morrison Street Bridge, the wind gauge there registered gusts up to 116. The wind literally tore off rooftops. It subsided during the night, but left behind tangled wires, shattered windows, downed trees, and left thousands of homes without phone service or electric power. People lined up to buy dry ice to preserve their frozen food. Camp stoves were at a premium. Much of the loss was insured, and the cost of repairs forced many insurance companies on the brink of bankruptcy. Those not covered by insurance merely bore the loss. The forest industry was hard hit. The wind knocked down $250 million worth of prime Douglas fir. Wind also knocked down our television tower. Channel 8 was off the air for a week until a new temporary tower was erected to replace the old one.
I'm sorry, off the air for a week. I did not know that part of the story. That's insane. All right, really quick, you might have just heard that we launched the Story News Weekly newsletter. I'll get it out. It's got all the stuff that you might have missed in the show, and the QR code is super subtle. It's really small behind me. There's an easy way to subscribe. Just open the camera on your phone, point it at the QR code like you're going to take a picture of it. It'll pop up a web page where you can go to sign up. You can also go to kgw.com/newsletter. Just pick up your phone and follow us on Twitter as well at the Story KGW. I do think we have a couple of questions here as I race through that, just to address some of your questions. I know we had one about the pronunciation of Idana. Nick watches us quite frequently, and he said, oh, that's how you pronounce it. Yes, it is Idana, just like Hey Dan, no tie-in. It's embarrassing that I pointed that out. Someone wrote in and said the story of those firefighters, this is from someone named Dan, the story of those firefighters helping those people around the lake is a movie if I've ever heard one. We completely agree, and we're so proud that Christine stayed on it and told you that story 6 months later. It's what we do here at The Story. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. We really appreciate it. Dan is back tomorrow. Have a great night.